All right, guys, it's Phil from ClevelandMoto, and we always try to bring you badass bikes on a budget, but today what we're gonna do is a little bit of education. One of our favorite motorcycles, one of the bikes we absolutely love and we love a lot, is the Kawasaki Versys. The Kawasaki Versys has been available in the United States since about 2007. It's gone through 3 changes. So it's gone through 3 distinct changes to the bike. Now that's not that surprising, seeing that the bike's been around for 13 years, but let's tell you about what those changes were. The first version 1 of the bike, had a slightly different screen. It was more rounded, more bullet shaped. Version 2, which we have right here, this is a 2014. Version 2, you'll see, has this, we call it the Punisher headlamp, because the headlight actually does look like the Punisher symbol. This is version 2. Version 2 hit the market in about 2010. It went from 2010 to 2014. Version 1 and version 2 mechanically were the same bikes. They were identical machines. The only thing that was different was a little bit of cosmetics there at the front of the bike. Now, when we get into the third version, that's where the big changes occur. That's 2015 and newer. Right now, you'll see today we have 3 of these bikes we're going to talk about. The Versys is actually a portmanteau. So portmanteau means it's the 2 words put together. It's a versatile system. So this is Kawasaki's versatile system. Very much like Ducati has their multi-strada, it's designed to do one bike that can do a lot of jobs. Now this is the same 650cc motor that Kawasaki uses in a lot of their different machines. A lot of their different bikes use this parallel twin 650. And in this particular bike, it's got a really nice tune on it. So we're going to look back at this version 2 that you see in front of me, which is a 2014. You will notice there's a minor shade difference, a color difference between the 2014 and the 2015. You'll also notice the 2014 with its Punisher headlight is a little bit different than the 2015 with its more ninja-like twin headlights. There was a change that happened in 2015 where the bike decided to change, or designers decided to change the bike's focus from being something that's probably an adventure off-roady kind of bike to a bike that's more light touring and is going to get used on the road more than it will be off-road. And so a couple of minor things were changed. We're going to talk about that in this video. The biggest thing that people are going to notice right off the tick between the 2 bikes is that front end. So the front end in the 14 and earlier is more narrow, it's smaller, it's got a little bit more of a beak to it, and it doesn't give you a ton of wind protection. In the 2015 and later, you're going to see that this front end and the cheeks on the gas tank are a little bit bigger. They give you considerably more wind protection. This is a much happier bike to ride at 80 miles an hour than this bike is. This bike gives you more wind protection by a long shot than this one. Now, another thing that's interesting is they changed the steering geometry. So this bike had a very steep front steering geometry, and on this bike they opened it up a little more to give it more predictable behavior on the freeway. Now, when you're really riding, I've ridden these bikes a lot, gone between the 14 and the 15, the Generation 2 and the Generation 3. It's really kind of hard to detect. I'm not going to go as far as to say, oh, the 14 really carves and it's better for canyon racing and stuff. Not so much. It's really kind of hard to notice until you get the tape measure out. When you get the tape measure out, you are going to find that the 2015 and later, the 3rd generation, is about 5 inches longer because of that change in geometry. So that's quite a bit. A bike that's 5 inches longer. So it goes from an 84-inch wheelbase to an 89-inch wheelbase between our 2nd generation and our 3rd generation. Now the height of the bike changes a tiny bit too. So this bike right here measures out at 55 inches high, and this bike measures out at 52 inches high. But really, I think that's mostly just about the way the bike is stanced a little bit, as opposed to anything else, massive changes in the suspension. Now, the 2nd and 1st generation bikes, they had 7 inches of ground clearance, 7.1 inches of ground clearance. When they got to the 3rd generation, as we said, a little bit more street focused, they lowered that ground clearance a tiny bit. So it's 6.7 inches of ground clearance, which is only 0.4 of an inch lower. So it's not that much to talk about. The weight, not that different. So the 1st generation, ABS was optional. The 2nd generation, ABS was optional. And the 3rd generation, 2015 and newer, ABS is standard equipment. The bike, the 2015 and newer, is in fact 4 pounds heavier. So it tips the scales at 458 pounds, whereas your 2014 and earlier is only about 454 pounds, man. And that still is pretty damn light for a 650 light touring bike. Again, ABS standard. They all run the same 120/70 by 17 on the front, 160/70 by 17 on the back. So buying tires for these bikes is cheap and cheerful. It is not hard to find tires for your Versys. Gas tank, yeah, 5 gallons on Generation 1 and Generation 2, a bonus half a gallon hiding there in the Generation 3. So this bike does pick up an extra half a gallon. What is consistent across all 3 generations is the miles per gallon. These things sip gas. 63 miles per gallon. You do the math on that, you're gonna find that you have over a 300-mile range on a tank of gas on a Versys. And they're very friendly too. They don't mind drinking that 87 octane gas. I've run it in mine and it's very happy with it. If you flog it and you ride it like you stole it, that 63 mile per gallon number is gonna drop down to about 50 miles per gallon. So, you know, that's really not that bad. So to go from normal cruising to get the best mileage to super aggressive riding, you're not losing a lot. There is a change in the horsepower. That's something that's interesting. They changed the cam timing a little bit in the 3rd generation, gave the bike a little more power. That's a really clever thing. So it's the same motor tune. It's actually, the funny thing is usually when you see the sport version of a bike, like with the Suzukis and stuff, where the SV would have a more powerful engine than the V-Strom, right? Well, no, in this Kawasaki, it's funny, these do 69 horsepower, the older version is 64 horsepower. That's a 5 horsepower gain, that's pretty substantial. And the Versys does in fact put out more ponies than their cruiser version of the same bike and their sport bike version of the same bike. This thing's got fantastic brakes. The brakes are ABS brakes, standard from the factory, and they're the big 300mm rotors. They work really good. The bike's a lightweight bike, so when you brake on this thing, it's right there for you. Excellent brake control. And when they did the retune on the motor, what I can tell you from personal experiences, the fuel injection on these is very buttery, velvety soft. So the fuel injection doesn't give you any surprises whatsoever. The fuel injection system on these is the TTK38 from Kian, which anybody will tell you that is a bulletproof fuel injection system, gives very reliable performance. 6-speed transmissions across the range, hard to miss. What is cool about these bikes and why we like the Versys so much and why I like the Versys so much is you can see by the 3rd bike in our row, that's the LT, the light touring version. It's got the hand guards, it's got the saddlebags on the back. The mounts are genius. Turn the key, pop the button, the side bags come off in 1 second. Really, really easy. The top case is big and beautiful. To do a light touring bike, a bike that you're going to want to go cross-state, but then still have a light and agile, friendly bike when you get there, or take the boxes off and be able to go on the fire roads and stuff, it's hard to beat the Versys for that. It's convenient. It's incredibly versatile, as they say. What's fun about these bikes is all the magazines, when they do shootouts, the bikes they shoot these bikes out against. Competitors, obviously V-Strom 650, read everything you can. I think that's the best shootout, is between the Versys and the V-Strom. Fantastic shootout. They always shoot it out against the Aprilia Dorsoduro 750. Dorsoduro is the same thing. It's a, it's a dual sport bike, a dual intention bike. And that's really high praise. And they also shoot it out against the Tiger 800. They shoot it out against the Yamaha FZ09. Wow, if they're shooting it out against an Aprilia Dorsoduro 750, a Tiger 800, and a Yamaha FZ09, what does that tell you? That tells you this bike punches above its weight, and it absolutely does. Top speed on this bike's about 121 miles per hour. It gets right up there. I've done a lot of high-speed freeway running on it. It's a very, very happy motor. 2nd gear, 3rd gear, give it a little bump, the front wheel comes right up for you. It's a very, very fun bike to ride aggressive. When you're looking at these, if you're out there in the market and you're shopping for a used Versys, I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna see a lot of variants. You're gonna see some very, very low mile bikes. For instance, this bike here, this is a Generation 2. It's a 2014, but only has 1,700 miles on it. Looks like showroom new. Hold out, try to find a good one. Try to find the nicest one you possibly can, because some of these bikes did get beat up a little bit. Some of these bikes got put into the hands of either young riders or beginning riders that kind of went a little rough on them. So this is a wonderful bike. It's a very long-lasting motor. It's a very economically minded. Everything for these is affordable. And God, you talk about the aftermarket. These windshields move up and down simply by adjusting the knobs. You loosen the knob a tiny bit, the windshield goes up, the windshield goes down. There's tons of aftermarket windshields for this. There's tons of aftermarket luggage for it. And because it's a Kawasaki, again, everything's cheap and cheerful. It's not going to put too big of a hole in your wallet. Again, these are all available here at Cleveland Moto. Get in touch with us. Use the usual methods. If you have any questions or comments about the Versys, go ahead and leave them in the block. Of course, you want to subscribe because we are dropping these from time to time. And we do want to remind you to please ride fast and take chances.